Did you know that almost half the world lives on less than $2 a day? Or that nearly 80% of the world's population lives on less than $10 a day? How can we help these people when they have no access to banks or any financial services? That is where microfinance comes in. Microfinance is an innovative strategy for poverty alleviation in developing countries that provides financial services for the economically active poor. It allows the poor to help themselves and use their skills to start businesses and eventually alleviate themselves from poverty.
I'm an engineer. I don't know anything about microfinance.
Like tiny version of finance, like microfinance? Is that like what it's like?
I know very little about microfinance.
I have never heard of microfinance.
It's pretty much just kind of giving loans to the poorest of the poor. So it's typically people in third world countries who don't have access to banks, or maybe living on $1, $2 a day, have no credit history. So even if they did have access to a bank, they wouldn't be able to get a loan. And in doing so, it kind of gives them the ability to start like a self-sustaining business and then go from there.
Pretty much my understanding is that a bank would make loans to of small amounts of money to individuals so that they can start a business, usually in developing countries. And the amount of money seems very small to us as Americans, but it makes a big difference in their lives.
It's just large organizations taking donations from people, $5, $10, maybe $20, and then lending that out in small amounts to people in third world countries who need it more than us. And those money is usually loaned out at large interest rates, about 40–50%, and they usually paid back with very good default rates.
So microfinance was sort of born in Brazil in 1973. But around the same time, other people were experimenting with the concept. A couple of years later, Muhammad Yunus, who won the Nobel Peace Prize for his work with Grameen Bank, he did a similar thing in Bangladesh. So they're sort of considered the grandfathers of microfinance, the inventors of it. And since then, it's really exploded. It's reached tons of people across the world. Currently, there's over 100 million borrowers, more than that when you bring into account other microfinance products such as savings and insurance, remittances, everything else that goes into finance. It's a full-blown thing. It's not just credit anymore, and that's really quite amazing.
So that's an interesting question. Why is it that microfinance can lend money without any collateral like we're used to in our banking system? I think there's two reasons for that. One is the group lending model. One of the approaches is that people are jointly liable for their loan, and if one person in the group doesn't pay back, the other members of the group have to pay back. So social pressure, social capital, replaces the need for physical capital or money capital. And another reason is that many of these people have very few other options for where they can get their money. So microfinance uses a staged approach where you can get a little bit of a loan. If you pay that back, you can get another little bit, maybe a bigger loan. You can pay back that. So there's an incentive for people to keep paying back their loans so they can keep coming back and accessing more.
You're making all these tiny loans. It's very risky. Where are you going to get this money from? And it's interesting that it used to be very donor dependent, but nowadays, there's private investors with returns. There's giant investment vehicles that basically pool investors in mutual funds, and they make great returns in the microfinance industry.
I think it's kind of the best option that people have in terms of getting themselves out of poverty.
There's so many other components that are necessary, but it certainly is a promising component of a package.
It's definitely not the mechanism. It's not going to solve poverty. It is not, there's a lot of other things that need to happen for people in developing countries. They need access to a bunch of other kinds of services, but this is one service that can really help boost their ability to manage their finances and to grow and to get profit.
It seems to me that technology will really drive the ability of microfinance to scale up and reach 10 times as many people as it is now. Mobile phone banking seems to be quite a trend. I think that many more people need to get trained in microfinance so they can manage these microfinance organizations. There's going to be a lot of consolidation in the industry, so you get some very large, very successful banks figuring out ways to serve millions of people at a time.
This is microfinance in action. You may notice that women are prevalent in microfinance. Indeed, women make up the majority of borrowers and are a major constituent of the industry. Here, we see a typical group lending meeting. Borrowers gather to repay their loans as well as educate themselves on good business practice.
Quietly sat between the folds of a tree trunk.
We spent a lot of time in, the offices of financial institutions and working with loan officers. But probably the most interesting thing that we did was get a chance to actually go to the market and see some of the clients who actually piled into this really, really small room with all the kids who were on the microfinance trip and like all the women from the market. And they just had this really awesome amount of excitement in how microfinance gave them this opportunity to expand their economic ability. But one thing that I didn't really realize is how microfinance gave an opportunity for these women to, for the first time ever, have a real sense of self-confidence. And that's what I think it's all about. It's not just credit or deposits, it's about like building the confidence of like some very underprivileged people.
I think there's what's today known as a double bottom line. I mean, you feel like by being involved in microfinance, you are actually contributing to the well-being of others.
It is a great way to help people to sustain itself. It's a great way to get people from the outside world involved because they realize that they can really do something. They can help people, but they can also, earn money doing what they like to do.
Not necessarily just giving a fish to somebody, but rather teaching somebody how to fish. It is very fulfilling, and it's a way of applying the knowledge, in my case, into finance in a way that's not necessarily just, making more money for those who have money, but rather for those who actually need it. And it's one of those few places where you can actually make a living and still have an impact.
want to learn more about microfinance?
Yeah!